Ethan never imagined the woman he planned to marry would one day be ashamed to stand beside him. Madison had once adored his hardworking nature, but now she treated him like a burden she needed to hide. She told her wealthy friends he was too rough, too ordinary, someone unworthy of stepping into their exclusive world. But what none of them knew was that Ethan wasn't just some mechanic struggling to fit in. He was the silent heir to the very elite club Madison worshipped, a place built by his own family, a place where his last name carried weight that could silence any room. And on the night of the club's biggest charity auction, everything Madison thought she controlled would slip through her fingers. Because Ethan was done being invisible. He was ready to show the world exactly who he was and expose who Madison had become. Madison hadn't always been this way. When she and Ethan first got engaged, she loved visiting his small workshop, laughing at the grease on his face, insisting she didn't care about money or status. But the moment she joined the elite Evergreen Hills Club, a place where every member drove luxury cars and carried last names etched into old money history, something inside her changed. It started subtly. She stopped inviting Ethan to gatherings, claiming they were boring business events he wouldn't enjoy. Then she began criticizing his clothes, his hands, even his truck, saying they made her look out of place among her new circle. Eventually, the excuses turned into insults. She told him not to pick her up at the club because his presence might make people ask questions. She joked with her friends about him being a blue-collar project she was trying to polish. To them, Ethan becomes a story she twisted to sound pitiful, an ordinary mechanic who was lucky she lifted him up. The truth was the opposite, but Ethan stayed silent. He didn't want to embarrass her, and he didn't want to start a fight, so he swallowed the hurt and told himself it was just a phase. But it was. The deeper Madison sunk into that glamorous world, the more she distanced herself from him. Ethan noticed she only introduced him to people outside the club, never to the members she idolized. Every time he asked why, her face tightened. She said he wouldn't understand their conversations. She claimed they expected a certain image. She insisted she was protecting him from judgment. But Ethan could see it clearly. She wasn't protecting him. She was protecting herself. One night, after Madison invited him to pick her up from a restaurant, he overheard her speaking with her friends before he approached the table. They asked why her fiancé never attended club dinners. Her response cut deeper than anything she had ever said to his face. "He's sweet, but he's not presentable. You know how it is. I can't just bring a mechanic into Evergreen Hills. People will think I'm settling." Her friends laughed, thinking she was joking, but Madison didn't crack a smile. Ethan froze where he stood, the words echoing through him. He felt humiliation crawl up his spine, not because he was ashamed of who he was, but because the woman he loved saw him as something lesser, something to hide. She spotted him moments later and acted as if nothing had happened, greeting him with forced excitement. But Ethan couldn't forget what he heard. That night, the truth settled in his chest like a stone. Madison didn't just feel embarrassed, she was ashamed of him. And no matter how much he loved her, he couldn't let this continue. For the first time, Ethan realized something had to change. And the choice he would make next would alter everything they thought they knew about each other. Ethan sat alone in his small living room long after Madison had gone to sleep, replaying her words in his mind. He had spent months hoping she would eventually see him again, the real him, the man she once loved without conditions. But the version of Madison he saw now cared more about polished reputations and whispered approval than about any truth that mattered. For years, Ethan kept one part of his life locked away because he wanted to succeed on his own merit. He didn't want to be known as the son of Robert Carter, the man who built Evergreen Hills Club from the ground up. His father had taught him the value of work, insisting that owning something meant nothing if you weren't willing to understand the labor behind it. So Ethan trained as a diesel mechanic, not because he had to, but because he wanted to prove he could live a life defined by his choices. He never told Madison about the club because it felt unnecessary at first. He thought she loved him for who he was, not what he inherited. But as she drifted further into that world of high-status egos and curated perfection, hiding the truth started to feel less like humility and more like a ticking bomb. The night he overheard her conversation, the bomb finally went off. He realized she wasn't just embarrassed by his job, she was embarrassed by him. And that stung far deeper than any class divide. The following morning, Ethan called the one person who had always understood him without judgment, his older sister, Claire. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm but immediately concerned. He rarely called her this early unless something serious was happening. He told her everything. The comments, the secrecy, the way Madison had twisted his identity to fit a narrative she preferred. Claire listened quietly, never interrupting, but he could hear the disappointment simmering beneath her calm. She had warned him before that some people cared more about surfaces than substance, but Ethan had wanted so badly to believe Madison wasn't one of them. When he finished, Claire exhaled slowly. "Then it's time," she said. "Time for what?" Ethan asked. "Time to stop hiding," she replied. "The charity auction is in 3 days. You know the board wants you there. Let them see you, let her see you, and let her face what she's done." Ethan hesitated, not because he doubted his place at the club, but because he dreaded the moment Madison would realize who he really was. He never wanted revenge. He just wanted honesty. But honesty had become impossible, while the truth stayed buried. Claire assured him everything would be arranged. The staff briefed, the board prepared, the announcement planned. All he had to do was show up. When he hung up the phone, Ethan sat quietly for a long time, listening to the hum of morning light slipping through his window. He wasn't doing this to humiliate Madison. He was doing it because he finally understood that hiding his identity had allowed her to treat him like someone disposable. And he was done being disposable. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of clarity. 3 days from now, the truth would speak for itself. And Madison would have no choice but to see exactly who he was, whether she liked it or not. The night of the charity auction arrived with the kind of polished luxury Madison adored. Crystal chandeliers glowed above the ballroom, live musicians filled the air with soft strings, and every guest appeared dressed to perfection. Madison was in her element, weaving through conversations, laughing just a little too loudly, eager to prove she belonged among people who measured worth by appearances. She assumed Ethan was working late, which suited her just fine. She didn't want him here, not tonight, not ever. What she didn't know was that Ethan had already arrived. He stepped through the back entrance with Claire, who walked beside him with calm confidence. Staff members straightened their posture the moment they saw him. Managers greeted him respectfully, addressing him as Mr. Carter, something Ethan hadn't heard in years outside family gatherings. For the first time, he didn't ask them to stop. Tonight, the truth had a place. The event coordinator rushed over, double-checking final details with Claire, barely able to hide the nervous excitement of revealing the board's youngest member. Ethan took a steady breath before entering the ballroom. He wasn't here to flaunt anything. He was here because hiding had caused enough damage. As he walked through the grand doorway, the reaction was immediate. A wave of recognition rippled across the room. Older members who knew his father approached first, shaking his hand, welcoming him back, some even embracing him. Newer members looked around in confusion, whispering to each other, trying to identify the man drawing so much attention. Madison, across the room, froze mid-conversation when she noticed the shift. The crowd subtly parted, and she saw Ethan, clean suit, composed expression, surrounded by board members and senior staff. For a moment, she didn't process it. Her mind refused to connect the man being treated like royalty with the fiancé she had mocked for not fitting in. But when Claire walked to the stage and raised the microphone, Everything became painfully clear. "Thank you all for joining us tonight," Claire began, smiling warmly. "We're honored to welcome someone who has always been a part of this place, even if he preferred working quietly outside the spotlight. Please join me in recognizing my brother, Ethan Carter, co-owner of Evergreen Hills Club." The applause erupted instantly. Madison's breath caught in her throat. Her hands shook. Her friends stared at her, confused and questioning, silently recalling every insult she had ever thrown at him. She felt exposed, stripped of all the power she thought she held. Ethan met her eyes across the ballroom, but his expression wasn't triumphant or cruel. It was distant, detached. A man who no longer saw a future where she belonged. Madison stumbled toward him, forcing a trembling smile as cameras flashed around them. But before she could speak, one board member shook Ethan's hand and congratulated him loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Madison swallowed the shame burning her throat. Every lie she'd crafted collapsed in an instant. Every judgment she'd made was reflected back at her under the harsh light of truth. And for the first time, she realized Ethan had never been the one out of place. She had. Ethan stepped away from the applause as soon as the formal introductions ended. He needed a moment alone, a moment to breathe without Madison's shocked stare clinging to him. But she rushed after him anyway, her heels clicking sharply against the marble, her voice trembling as she called his name. He turned slowly. Her face was pale, makeup cracked at the corners where tears threatened to spill. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, but her tone carried more panic than remorse. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He simply studied the woman who once claimed she loved him for his heart, not his wallet. "Would it have changed anything?" he finally asked. Madison opened her mouth, but no real answer came out. She tried again, grabbing his arm desperately. "You made me look like a fool. I defended you. I told them you—" Ethan cut her off gently but firmly. "You told them I wasn't presentable, that I wasn't good enough to stand beside you." Her expression twisted in humiliation. "I didn't mean it," she whispered. "You meant every word," Ethan replied. "And you know it." She shook her head quickly, like she could outrun the truth. Her voice grew louder as she scrambled for excuses. "It was just pressure. They expect certain things. You don't understand how hard it is to fit in there." Ethan took a step back. "Madison, I grew up in that world," he said calmly. "They didn't reject you. You rejected me." The color drained from her face. She tried one more tactic, tears. They spilled suddenly, dramatically, as she clung to his jacket and begged him not to embarrass her further. People were watching. Whispers floated from nearby tables. But Ethan wasn't the same man who quietly endured her insults to keep the peace. He gently removed her hands from his jacket. "This isn't about embarrassment," he said. "This is about respect, and you stopped respecting me a long time ago." The word, stopped, shattered what little composure she had left. She collapsed into a chair, pleading with him, promising to change, promising she didn't care about status anymore. But Ethan had heard promises like that before. He knew they lasted only until the next judgmental glance from her friends. "I'm done, Madison," he said softly. "I can't marry someone who's ashamed of me." Her cry echoed across the hallway, raw and sharp. But Ethan didn't waver. He walked away, leaving her clutching her dress like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. The consequences came quickly. Word spread about her treatment of Ethan, and within a week her employer learned she had been using the club's name to impress clients and secure deals she wasn't qualified for. They terminated her contract without hesitation. Her parents attempted to intervene, reaching out to the club's board to salvage their daughter's reputation, but the damage was irreversible. Behind the scenes, even her closest friends avoided her, unwilling to associate themselves with the scandal. Madison found herself isolated, reputation crumbling, desperately trying to rewrite the narrative. but nothing, she said, could undo what she had done. And Ethan, for the first time in a long time, felt a strange sense of peace. Painful, yes, but clean, like a wound finally allowed to heal. Madison's downfall unfolded faster than she ever imagined. After Ethan ended the engagement, she tried to keep her dignity intact by telling her friends it was a mutual decision, but few believed her. Rumors spread quickly, each one more humiliating than the last. People whispered about the things she had said behind Ethan's back, stories she once told proudly, but now desperately tried to deny. When the club officially revoked her membership, she showed up at the front desk demanding an explanation, insisting it was a mistake. Security escorted her out, while guests watched with a blend of pity and uncomfortable fascination. A shaky video of her yelling at staff, mascara running down her face, hit social media within hours. It went viral overnight. Madison tried to post a long caption explaining how she was the real victim, but comments flooded in accusing her of being manipulative, entitled, and cruel. Nothing she said slowed the tidal wave. As panic set in, she began making reckless decisions. She booked a fake wedding reception at a luxury restaurant, pretending she and Ethan had privately reconciled, hoping the news would reach the club and ease the backlash. But when the manager called Ethan to confirm details, her lie was exposed instantly. The restaurant banned her from future bookings. Her desperation deepened. She attempted to use old invoices from charity events to get discounts and complimentary services, forging signatures and claiming she was still connected to the Carter family. When staff caught the inconsistencies, they threatened legal action. Madison switched strategies again, insisting online that she was pregnant and that Ethan had abandoned her. She staged emotional photos, holding her stomach dramatically, hoping sympathy would drown out the criticism. But when someone from her former workplace anonymously leaked that she had pulled the same trick years earlier during a breakup, the internet tore her apart. Every lie she told seemed to birth 3 more lies, each one harder to maintain. Instead of stepping back, she spiraled. She appeared outside the club repeatedly, shouting that the board had ruined her life and that Ethan had manipulated the entire situation. Guests filmed her every time. Clips of her screaming at the gates, begging to be let in, or accusing random members of conspiring against her circulated across multiple platforms. The once polished, status-chasing Madison was now a spectacle people shared for entertainment. Her parents stopped answering her calls, embarrassed by the attention and exhausted by her behavior. Former friends muted her, blocked her, or quietly distanced themselves. Her carefully built image, classy, elegant, connected, collapsed entirely. She became a cautionary tale in social circles, the girl who tried too hard to climb higher and ended up falling farther than anyone else. Through it all, Madison clung to the belief that somehow she could fix everything if she just found the right story to tell. But every attempt only dug the hole deeper. For the first time in her life, she was forced to confront a truth she had always avoided. Her downfall wasn't caused by Ethan, the club, or her critics. It was caused by the person staring back at her in every camera, every mirror, every viral video, herself. Ethan didn't follow Madison's downfall online. He didn't watch the videos, didn't read the comments, didn't track the chaos unfolding around her. He had spent too long carrying the weight of her expectations, and now he finally felt free to live without constantly defending who he was. In the weeks after the charity auction, he devoted himself to the projects he and Claire had discussed for years. They expanded the club's community outreach program, offering scholarships and vocational training for young adults who wanted to enter trades but lacked resources. Ethan visited workshops, met with students, and shared his own story openly, though he never mentioned Madison by name. For the first time in a long while, he felt genuinely useful, not as a club owner but as someone who understood the value of hands-on work. One afternoon, during a welding demonstration at a local training center, he met Ava. She was confident, practical, and warm, the kind of person who spoke with purpose and listened with real interest. Her classes were known for turning struggling students into skilled welders who landed stable jobs, and Ethan admired the way she talked about them, as if each success was personal. At first, their conversations were simple. They discussed equipment, curriculum, and the challenges students faced. But over time, Ethan noticed how easy it was to be himself around her. He didn't need to explain why he preferred fixing engines to attending high society brunches. He didn't have to defend his choices or soften them to seem more acceptable. Ava saw value in the same places he did, in effort, in honesty, in people. She asked about his work at the club, not because of its prestige, but because she was curious how someone could bridge two seemingly opposite worlds. Ethan appreciated that she never treated him differently when she learned he was a co-owner. To her, he was simply Ethan. They spent more time together as the weeks passed, visiting workshops, planning new programs, and sharing stories during late afternoon drives. Every moment with her felt steady, grounded, and real. There were no masks, no personas, no stages to perform on. Just two people building something meaningful. Meanwhile, Claire watched the change in her brother with quiet satisfaction. She saw how he smiled more, how he spoke without hesitation, how his shoulders relaxed in a way they never had around Madison. It was the kind of peace she'd hoped he would find. Ethan didn't rush anything with Ava, but one evening, after a long day helping students prepare for certification tests, she invited him to stay for dinner with a small group of instructors. They laughed, teased one another, and shared old training stories until the sun dipped below the horizon. When Ava walked him to his truck afterward, she hesitated for a moment. Ethan noticed the way she looked at him, not with expectation or calculation, but with simple affection. It was the first time in months that someone looked at him without judgment. He felt something shift gently inside him. A possibility. A new beginning. As he drove home that night, Ethan realized that life didn't have to be defined by the pain of his past. It could be shaped by the people who chose to see him clearly, the ones who valued him for reasons that had nothing to do with wealth or status. For the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. And hope, he realized, was something he hadn't felt in years. Madison continued posting long rants online about how she had been betrayed and mistreated, but the world had stopped listening. Her audience had dwindled to a handful of strangers who found her drama entertaining rather than believable. Each attempt to rewrite the story only pushed her further into the role of a cautionary tale, someone who had lost everything because she valued appearances more than character. Meanwhile, Ethan moved forward with a quiet clarity that surprised even himself. He no longer carried the heaviness that once shadowed his every step. He no longer questioned whether he was enough. He spent his days working with Claire and supporting new apprentices, and his evenings often brought simple moments with Ava that reminded him what genuine connection felt like. One night, as he locked up the workshop after a late training session, he realized just how far he had come. He didn't feel bitterness toward Madison. He felt relief. He had escaped a future built on pressure and pretense, and stepped into one shaped by honesty, purpose, and people who valued him for exactly who he was.